I am fortunate in my role to work with many, many awesome farmers, and the next speaker is no exception. I'd like to welcome Jason Condon to the stage. Jason Condon's family has been farming in Boulder County since 1859, giving him a unique insight into the area's agricultural roots and evolution. He grew up working on the family farm, and throughout middle and high school, he worked for Steve Penner, who was a longtime farmer in the region. Jason also enlisted in the U.S. Navy and learned some valuable lessons through 2 combat deployments, which was very helpful for farming in Boulder County. And then in 2005, him and his wife, Natalie, saved up enough money to buy 40 acres in East Boulder County. Today, they farm together 585 acres, and Jason, I feel like, is the link between conventional and organic in this county. He bridges both worlds, and so we're so happy to welcome you to the stage.
So, thank you. I appreciate it. It's really great to be here. I was secretly hoping everybody would get tired and go home at lunch, but you're still here, so we're going to keep going. I have, as Lauren said, I guess before I start, I just want to mention a couple things. I have the privilege of farming on Boulder County open space and City Boulder open space, and I have for quite a long time. And in such, I get to work with these folks all year. And so I really want to say thank you. The heart that you guys put into this is kind of the heart that they put into everything all year. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that, you know, everything we do as farms, we do it as a partnership. And without really great partners with the county, the city, we don't exist. I mean, the reality is this whole system, what Therese showed up here, that only exists because of that partnership. So anyway, thank you. And yeah, please. So, you know, I got asked to speak. I think I asked. Lauren and Vanessa cornered me and they bullied me. You know, I was a little nervous about speaking at first because I thought, well, you know, I looked at, you know, Dr. Lucero and the other folks that have spoken here, and I thought, you know, I'm not a soil scientist. That's not me. I'm not sure what I have to provide. But, you know, as I thought about it, we do have a lot to provide because we've learned a lot of lessons over the years. And as Lauren said, we kind of are the bridge a little bit. So I'll get into just a little bit of history. And I just have some pictures running. I don't have any slides. I'm not a reformed academic like Mark. I never was an academic, so I just put pictures up there. You know, the history, my family's been farming here for a long time. And as I looked through the history, what I've realized is they have been innovators always. I think sometimes we like to think that, you know, farming's been a certain way and we're going to change it. Well, farming's never been a certain way. They were innovating before they came to this country. They're innovating ever since. They started growing potatoes for miners. That was kind of the first farming I knew about. So they would grow potatoes, send them up with the miners. They would grow vegetables. They started growing grains. You know, they had steam engines and they did custom threshing. They milked cows, they grew beef cows, they grew sugar beets, corn, a little bit of everything. Some of the family even had big chicken barns for a while. And so that process of evolution, that wasn't just sort of accidental. That was people trying to fit their version of farming into the reality that they were facing. And I kind of take some comfort in that because it's nice to know that that's still what we're doing. And I think sometimes it's nice to feel like we're kind of on the cutting edge, but sometimes it's nice to think, you know, we're just a process. So, you know, as we look back through some of those histories, they weren't always the right moves. We certainly, as Jay's slides this morning showed, it hasn't been a steady upward trend. We make some mistakes, and we'll probably make some more, but we keep improving. And, you know, about 35 years ago, my father, he started growing pumpkins. He started selling them in a pumpkin patch. A lot of you know my dad, he's here. That was kind of like, at the time, people were sort of like, that's sort of weird. But he saw something that most people didn't. And so he evolved. And so when I came along, I farm with Natalie, my wife. I lost her. She's out here somewhere. Anyway, she grew up, her family owns a farm in Switzerland. So she grew up spending her summers in Switzerland, baling hay and, being a farmer. And that was some of her first memories. And so when we started farming, we had this sort of, we inherited this agricultural history, but we did not inherit agricultural land or agricultural equipment, which is useful. So we knew we were going to farm together, and we knew we were going to have to do it differently. And additionally, we started a farm here in Boulder County, and that's not the easiest thing to do. And I think there's a lot of goods and a lot of bads. I think there's a lot of opportunities that exist here because of the forward thinking that this community did many years ago to preserve agricultural land. And so we have some opportunities that they don't have other places. We also have a public that is really interested in farming, and that provides a lot of opportunity. And we have, markets. I mean, Mark was talking about a lot of his markets. That's going to be a harder business to pull off in some other places. So we have a lot of opportunities, but there's also a lot of challenges. And as a farmer, I think I'm kind of a boots on the ground sort of guy, and I think we always have to look at challenges with eyes open, and we always have to think about those challenges head on. We can't hide from them, and there are some real challenges to farming here. So when we started farming, we kind of knew that we weren't going to be able to just do what people had always done. We were going to have to be different. So we started growing produce, and we had one of our first contracts was we had a contract of all things with a Dutch flower breeder. We grew petunias, like thousands of petunias, and we grew vegetables, and we went to farmers markets, and that's really kind of how we got started. And then we started a farm store. We had a property in Lafayette. They had built a barn, and we were able to move into that barn and take it over and turn that into a farm store. And Natalie really took that and turned it into a lot more than a store. It was really a community center. It was a place where a lot of other farms could sell things. And it was, really, she's basically devoted her life to food access and connecting farms to eaters. So in addition, we had a CSA, and we were growing, I don't know, maybe 150 acres of produce. And it was great, but as time went on, we felt like we needed to evolve a little bit. And so with life sort of gets complicated, and your kids get older and your parents get older, and we really wanted to kind of rebalance things. So we sort of stepped away from produce, but we were still, passionate about farming. We weren't going to stop farming. And we wanted to evolve in a way that felt, true, that we were making progress with, in balancing all parts of our life. And I think that's really important when we look out at what it means to farm. We have to remember that balance is a lot of things. I mean, there's financial balance, there's emotional balance, there's community balance, there's soil balance. And if we get one part wrong, we kind of get the whole ball of wax wrong. So, and I'm not saying that we did the right thing, but as we've evolved, we kind of switched to more row crops. And we started fairly small, and we ramped up our row crop production, and then we got into some custom harvesting. So we worked for a dairy. We custom harvested many thousand acres of hay, and then we kind of switched over. As we started doing this more and more, we were growing grains, we were custom planting. We started switching over to more and more hay production, and that felt good. We liked some aspects of growing forage, but it felt good to switch to hay crops. And I have to give a lot of credit to Lauren. We didn't just plant alfalfa or grass, we planted, mixes. So we're slowly converting the farm to a perennial system where we're growing hay and we're, using more diverse mixes. And that's really been a good progression. And that feels, that feels good. When you're walking out there, you can just sort of sense the farm after you've done it for enough years. You really get a sense for how things are, and you can just sort of feel when things are going right. And that's been a step that felt right. So, but we were still missing some pieces. We're still growing hay, selling hay, and we're still growing hay and selling hay, don't get me wrong. But I remember a guy we work with, who a lot of people here know, Phil from Colorado Cattlemen's. He said, Jason, the Amish say that if you sell your hay, you're selling your farm. And I thought, okay, that's interesting, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that. But that advice has always stuck with me. And so part of what we wanted to do is we wanted to start incorporating cattle into the farm. So we started grazing, and we started custom grazing. So we'd bring in some other ranchers' cattle, and we would bring them in, and we would work them through these row crop systems. And, there was a lot of missteps. I think sometimes in sort of settings like this, we think it's going to be a nice uphill, smooth upward incline. And sometimes it is, and sometimes we go backwards and mess it up. And we've messed it up quite a bit. I kind of chuckled because Mark said he fumbled a bit the first year, and I thought, oh, just the first year? Like, uh-oh. Anyway, we started incorporating cattle, and we started to really see that, okay, this is definitely part of the answer. And a lot of what we do, we're just one farm. We're not doing, we're not a research center, so we don't necessarily have all the answers, but we know that when we walk across the farm, we can kind of feel biodiversity. We know this is a real thing. We can feel when soil's happy, when soil's not happy. But we also know that we have to make money. We are always balancing out these things. How do we get better while staying balanced in the other aspects of life? And, I told this kind of history because I think it's really important to understand who we are and where we come from, because as Lauren said, I am often she said the bridge. I say sometimes I feel like the ambassador, or maybe the interpreter is the word, because I have a lot of great friends. And over the years, we've built friends in these different communities. So when, I talk to Mark, I know where Mark's coming from, because I haven't done exactly what Mark did, but I've done enough things like that I can really kind of feel where he's coming from, and I can understand that. But I've also, because I've also worked with a lot of conventional row crop farms, I'm really good friends with a lot of them. And, we have very close connections with some of the cattlemen in the area. And so because of that, we get this sort of role of interpreter. And I think, at first that sometimes seemed a little burdensome, but it's worked out, I think, in our favor a lot. And recently, a couple years ago, I'll get onto this sort of grazing program why I was asked to talk in the first place. So we started this program a couple years ago, and it started out of a couple of conversations. And these conversations sort of were, someone from the county came up to me and they said, Jason, we have these soil health principles, and we're making a lot of progress, and we're doing a lot of good stuff. And we're getting a lot of our small farms are doing a lot of amazing things, but we're not getting a ton of traction with some of our bigger farms. And, I should be clear at the moment that they were making progress. We were switching to strip till. There was a lot of progress in residue management, but we were still kind of in a system where we were basically selling most of our corn stalks, most of our straw. And so, this conversation went, well, we got to stop doing that. Why can't we get these guys to stop selling residue? And so, I initially answered this question sort of flippantly, and I said, well, it's pretty obvious. It's because the dairies and feedlots pay for it, and the county doesn't. So that seems like a, fairly easy knot to untangle. But that wasn't really, truly a fair answer. So, I thought about it a little bit, and a couple weeks went by, and we went back to this conversation, and we said, really what the problem here is that we are not really communicating very well with each other, and we're not really listening to each other very well. And that's sort of the core problem. And so, Jay's talk this morning was really interesting. And at the end of the talk, he got a question, which I found really interesting. Somebody from the audience said, how do we talk to conventional farmers about soil health? And when I heard that question, I thought, I would really like to rephrase that. I'd really like to say, are we listening to our conventional farmers about soil health? Because I feel like that's where we make some mistakes. I feel like that's where we run off the rails sometimes. And so, this conversation, I went back and I said, look, it's more than just money. Like when you say, oh, they pay for it, you don't, that makes it sound like sort of a greed proposition. I said, that's not what's going on here. What's going on is a couple things. It's a multifaceted problem, and we need to really understand their mindset before we can ask them to make a change. That's the only fair way to make reasonable change. So, I said there's a few counter incentives going on here, and we need to really take this problem and really untangle it carefully, because it's not just a simple make a change. This is a confusing problem. So I said, there's the financial portion is we're paying to grow a crop, and then we're asking people to not profit on the last, say, 20% of that crop. That's really difficult. And they see that there could be some soil benefits, but they also have to answer to the bank. And that's something that, we always have to remember when we're having soil health conversations is, the bank actually does not accept, CEC scores as collateral. It doesn't work that way. And so we have to remember that they're living in that world. But there's quite a bit more to it than that. There's also how we kind of look at what they do and how we incentivize that. So when we say we would like to limit tillage, we need to limit tillage, and then we say we want you to take 4 tons of corn stalks that are in these bales, leave them on the ground. It's Colorado, so we're going to get like no moisture all winter, and then it's going to, and then you're going to in the spring not do much tillage. And they're saying, well, that's not really going to work out too well. That's going to be a problem. And there's fears of nutrient tie-up, at least initially. And I think that there's a lot of evidence that we can get around that, but the truth is that is a fear. And if we don't address that fear, then we're not going to get past it. So we have to address it and say, look, how do we mitigate each of these problems? And, the last portion of it, though, is the biggest, and that's risk. So I went out and I said, okay, I think I can solve this problem, but we need to be creative. We need to be sort of outside of the box thinkers. And we need to talk to these farmers. We need to sit down with them where they are, and we need to ask them, what would it take to not bale your stocks? What would it take to keep these stocks on the field? And they said, well, we'd like to, but they listed off all the things I said. And so I said, okay, well how do we mitigate those? And we kind of talked about that. And he said, but the biggest thing is risk. He said, if I don't do my tillage in the fall, then I have to do it in the spring. And if I have to do 3 passes instead of 1 because I've got 4 tons of sticks on the ground that I have to work through, that's a risk that I might not get a crop in or get a crop in on time. And that has major ripple effects. And I think for me, because I've been in that situation, I know that's a risk to a farmer is deep. It's not like, oh yeah, I get it, risk. It's core. And so when you've been in a tractor at 2 a.m. and you've been working for 20 hours and it's going to snow and you've got a week's worth of work to do and you're not going to get it done, that's a really visceral feeling. And so I think, part of what we wanted to do was we wanted to say, look, we need to meet you where you are. And so we did that, and then we found some cattlemen, and we said, look, we need you to bring some cattle in, graze some residues. Great. He says, this is my friend Scott, and he said, yeah, no problem. He said, assuming you got good fences and good water and everything, this should be easy. And I said, oh, that's perfect. We don't have any of that. But, because that's kind of another little element of this is a lot of the infrastructure from these farms is gone. So now we're saying, how do we get back? Well, it's hard to get back. So we said, okay, we can figure that out. It's not rocket science, but it costs money. And so he said, yeah, that's great, but that's not the bigger problem. The bigger problem is we're working a complicated grazing system here. So if we just take 500 cows, throw them on, crop residue for a while, what do we do with them after that? That's a problem. And that's again where I think sometimes we like to breeze past the details. But when you're the guy that has 500 cows with no feed, that's not a detail. That's the whole game. That's core. And that kind of stress, we can't sort of gloss over that sort of risk because that risk is critical. And so, we were able to come up, I'm running a little low on time, so I'll try to be quick, but we came up with this program where we would actually graze 3 seasons, and we would do kind of we would work things around so we weren't messing up the cattle system. And it was really important for this program. This is not our farm. This is county-owned properties with tenants on it. And we really wanted this program to grow. And so we said, we cannot do this unless we can do it how it fits into farmers' systems that they're already running. Because for me, that's a core element of how this is going to work or how it's not going to work. We can't ask them, hey, just change everything you do. We have to say, okay, here's where you are. We want to meet you here, and we want to incorporate this. And then if we can do that, we'll maybe incorporate the next thing. And to me, that's how we make progress. So that was really core, is we had to fit in to the system that was already there. And, to make a long story short, the system looked pretty good, but we realized right away that, this is not going to just happen organically. We're going to need help to make this happen. So we went to the county, and fortunately we were able to find forward-thinking people at the county. Therese got up and spoke, and I'm really thankful to Therese, Cassandra, Aaron, and Trent, and we just said, we want to grow this, but we need to seed it. And so we can't expect these programs to just happen organically. We're going to have to help it. And we have to help it carefully in such a way that we can sort of ramp everything down. So our goal with the program was, we would lower, the county would put up money to help cover some of these infrastructure costs. And the county would put up money to cover some of the financial shortfalls and risks that the farmer took. But then every year we would be able to drop that amount down, because as we improve infrastructure, as we improve soil health, as we mitigate risk, and as we show that we can actually handle this project, we can build trust. And so then the farmers trust us a little bit more. And Scott here, I can tell him with a straight face, we are going to be able to mitigate this risk by processing this. We're going to be able to bring enough animals in. These animals really are going to process these stocks to the point where you're not going to have a problem. And, in the long, that's kind of how it happened. So it was really a partnership, and it really relied on everybody coming together. Boulder County being forward thinking enough to say, maybe we need to look at how we fix some of these problems while not disturbing the system that we've made over the years. That's so great. Because when Therese got up, she showed the map. This is an amazing system. We have this amazing gift that we were given by people in the past who were forward thinking, and they chose to create this open space system. We have to respect that. And we have to respect those people who have done the work to create the system. And by respecting these people, that doesn't mean we don't change. That doesn't mean we don't evolve, we don't grow. But what it means is we have to take steps to improve a system without in the process breaking the system. And the only way you can do that is to put people who understand the system at the center. And so, I had I'm running out of time here, but I had a conversation last night. We had a little presenter dinner, and I happened to be sitting right across from Dr. Lucero and her husband, and she was telling me about all the interesting scientific things she was doing. It was really fascinating, and I was learning a lot just chatting with her at dinner. And but as I was going home, I thought to myself, does it matter? Like, is all that work she's doing and all the work that everybody else in the soil health world and all the surrounding science, does that matter? And the answer is, it only matters if we can actually put it to use. If it stays in academia, then it's just sort of an exercise. It only matters if we can actually use the principles that these folks are working so hard to develop and understand and put it to use. And to do that, we're going to rely on people like the folks at the county. We're going to rely on people like the folks at the city. We're going to rely on a lot of partners. But at the end of the day, the farmers are going to be the people that make these systems work or not. And I think that, I'm encouraged, because when I look out at this room, I see farmers and I think, these are innovative people. I mean, I think my story is a little bit unique, but what I think is not unique is I think everybody has a history of growing, evolving, changing, thinking, being passionate about what they do. And I think that's really common ground. I think that's what makes farmers such a great group of people. I mean, I love that I can walk into a room full of farmers and I can find my, number one competitor and I can ask him for a favor. And he'll say, sure, no problem. And I think that's pretty rare. I don't think that's true in most businesses. So what I'd really like to sort of encourage everybody to do is to really make sure that when we're thinking about these changes we're making, we have to make sure to respect what came before us, and we have to make sure that we're not going backwards accidentally in the process of going forwards. And the way that we're going to do that is by really listening to each other. And so I hope, that would be my hope. So, what I would say is spend a bit more time learning. And, I think that when you learn, you kind of accidentally teach. Every conversation I have is a two-way conversation. And so that's what I would really like to see is if we could take this great system we built and we can grow it, but we grow it in a way that's respectful of the amazing things that have come before us. And I think that's a real gift. We've been given this gift, and it's our responsibility to move it forward. But we need to do that carefully, and we need to make sure that we're remembering that the people that understand the systems have to be involved in the conversations. So I think I'm about to get red carded, which I don't really know much about soccer, but I think it's bad. So I'm gonna sit down. But I really appreciate everybody coming out today, and I'm excited to learn from the next two speakers. Thank you.